All right. Welcome, everybody. This is our second webinar with Jessie. Jessie is an LCSW and a BCBA. And she does a lot of amazing work. If you haven't watched it yet, she has our first webinar that we did with her. We have the recording up on our website. So be sure to check out that one as well. But I am going to let her take it away and add anything that I might have forgotten to say. So here we go.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I've been working with individuals and children and families with autism for about 15 years, and I have my own practice. It's virtual, so I can anywhere in the state of Illinois. I'm located right now right outside of St. Louis, but I'm still happy to see clients in all areas. But work mainly with neurodiverse families and individuals, so a lot of overlapping diagnoses as well, like we're going to talk about tonight. So like autism and anxiety, autism and ADHD and depression, a lot of those co-occurring diagnoses. So we'll talk through those pieces tonight as there's a lot to untangle, however, in a way that we can understand and digest it that doesn't feel overwhelming. So I'll jump right in. So when we talk about the kind of two different sets of diagnoses. We've got our kind of neurodivergent diagnoses like autism and ADHD are the two kind of most popular ones, but and then we've got other types of mental health diagnoses, things like anxiety, depression, bipolar, OCD, PTSD, that we're trying to figure out as we're sitting with someone, whether it's our own child or someone that you're seeing, what am I treating? Am I treating the autism or am I treating the anxiety? Am I treating the autism or is this depression? And trying to peel those two pieces apart. So we're going to talk about some of these diagnoses and actually what the symptoms are and the overlaps, because you're going to find that a lot of these diagnoses actually have a lot of overlap. So, and I have a handout that you can take a look at that actually shows a lot of these diagnoses on a Venn diagram to compare and contrast them. So things like if we talk about, for example, I'm not going to go through every diagnosis and every symptom because it's just too much information. But if we talk about things that like autism and anxiety and trying to piece those apart and things that are uniquely, autistic in those diagnoses, right? The understanding things literally, needing the same routine and liking and understanding, social norms and social rules. And we think about anxiety and having a sense of impending fear or doom, being able to trembling, the hypervigilance, the panic symptoms. But then when we look at some of those like the two diagnoses and overlay them, what you're going to get is easily distracted, restless, thoughts or actions related to self-harm, difficulty controlling emotions, difficulty making decisions, impulsivity, low self-esteem, being rejection sensitive, sleep problems, overthinking, stimming. Those can be both in anxiety, someone I'm just seeing for anxiety, or someone I'm just seeing for autism, or both. Right? And so we're going to, like I said, we'll talk in a minute about how to draw the line and what you're seeing and how to support that person. But just know that a lot of these diagnoses, overlap. So let's talk about another one here. Let me pull up my notes here. Here we go. Depression and autism. Right. So again, let's talk about the overlap. So something that may be uniquely depression, I won't go again into things about autism, is any changes in weight, difficulty concentrating on things, low interest in things that losing interest in things you enjoy. But then again, you have autism and depression, sleep problems, getting anxious easily, because anxiety and depression are actually very close together. Difficulty making decisions, easily upset, overthinking, low self-esteem, difficulty maintaining friendships. So again, when we're looking at the symptoms, they have so much overlap. So then you're saying, okay, how do I know which is it that I'm working with? How do I know in my child or this individual that I'm supporting, what am I working? What am I working with, and how do I treat this? Or how do I provide interventions? So let's talk about, we're going to take a step back from all the diagnoses and all the labels and all of the symptoms, because sometimes we can get really tangled in this web and trying to sort things out, when ultimately we're really talking about nervous system energy, and we're talking about what are these symptoms, where are these symptoms in our body, and how are we experiencing them? Because sometimes taking that step back and looking at how the symptoms are experienced shows us what we need to do. So when we think about where does that energy of anxiety, where does that energy of movement come from? Where does that energy of I need to go, 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 or do? That energy is typically all right in that fight or flight, that mobilization energy. That's that energy that says I need to go and do something to make this situation better. Right? And then what do we think about that energy that says low self-esteem, or that energy that says I just don't want to get out of bed, or that energy that says it's just shut down. I don't want to respond. I don't want to answer this question. I just don't want to do anything. It's just a dropped energy. Where does that lie? That lies in this collapsed energy of our bodies and our nervous systems. So when we think about how to separate out our nervous system energies, I use a lot of polyvagal theory, and in the handout, you will see a nice little diagram that shows where these three systems lie. So I will just kind of use me as that model to describe these different states. So our most grounded, our most regulated state, regardless of our diagnoses, is the state they call the safe and social. It's based on right where our vagus nerve is, polyvagal theory, and that vagus nerve intersects when we're feeling safe, social, grounded, really up here on our shoulders and our face and our chest. It's this open, grounded, safe energy that says, yes, I'm ready to learn. I'm ready to engage. I'm ready to participate in the world. I'm ready to connect. I'm feeling safe and open. And that is all right here. But as soon as our bodies start to pick up things that just feel like too much, it's too much information. And so even think about autism, it's too much sensory information coming in. I'm getting flooded, I'm getting overwhelmed, or there's not enough information coming in. I'm seeking out, right? Think of the hypo versus hypersensitive nervous sensory systems. Or if we're thinking about, right, autism and some of those symptoms like I need to put things in a specific order in order to feel like it's a completed state, right? You see a lot of those pervasive behaviors. So, right, it's that energy then that says this mobilization, and it actually lowers our ability to connect with our eyes. So again, think autism, some of that ability of like, I just don't want to connect right now. I've got this energy. I need to be moving. I need to get things done. And it's really right here. You can't really see on camera, but right here around the gut, right here to the nose, this is where that energy connects in our bodies. And obviously it can affect then everywhere else, but this is where that nervous system energy lies. And it's that movement. So even thinking about anxiety, thinking about worst case scenarios, thinking about all the stuff that I need to do or haven't done yet, or what could go wrong in this situation, right? That impending doom that often comes with anxiety, right? That's all of this energy that says, I need to go, go, go and get things done. And then when we talk about, right, our bodies get tired here, and this is a lot of energy. So it's going to go to one of two places to rest. And either if it doesn't have enough co-regulation, which we'll talk about later when we talk about supports, if it doesn't have enough to come up here, it's going to drop down, and that's where you're going to feel it right here in your chest, all the way down to your gut. That's where that part of your body, those nervous system endings, nerve endings intersect. And that's this energy that says it's too much. Your nervous system collapses. It's just, I don't want to, I don't want to get out of bed, or I'm shutting down and I don't want to answer the questions that you're telling me to answer. I don't want to keep doing the tasks that you're telling me to do. It's the energy that says, I don't even want to, I'm zoning out and I'm tuning you out. I'm dropped. There's too much information coming in and I can't do anything about it. I'm dropping, right? So that's where that part of, if you think about depression diagnosis, that's where that lies. But even some of the autistic symptoms that we see in a lot of the people that you're either working with, living with, you're going to see that it's just too much and I'm dropping. Right. And so it's helpful. I'm going to invite you as you're, thinking about these nervous system states that we all go through them. And none of these are good. None of these are bad. None of these are right or wrong. They just are. They just are our body's natural response to the world around us. And I give the example so often of, I getting out the door in the morning. Often, like, I need my mobilization energy. If I don't use that mobilization energy, I'm not getting out the door in the morning. And right. So when think about after coming home from work all day, and then I come home, I'm with my family, right? When I get in bed, I drop a lot of the times. Sometimes I'd love to tell you, I definitely use my coping strategies and go into bed, and I'm up here in bed going to sleep. But on a rough day, I drop down. I'm probably doing something to zone out, and I go to sleep. I feel like a lot of you guys do. So none of these are good or bad. It's just our response to the world around us, taking in the supports that we have and the resources that we have at that time, right? And so when we reframe that, and then we start talking about, is this autism? Is this anxiety? Is this depression? Is this OCD? Is this PTSD, right? Some of those diagnoses may be helpful, but I really encourage you that if you're looking to really piece apart those symptoms, right? First, getting a good psychological evaluation. They're going to be the best initial piece to help you start teasing that apart. And then at the end of the day, what you're really looking at is nervous system energy. That if someone in front of you is in a fight or flight state, regardless if it's autism or anxiety, what I'm hearing they need is something to help co-regulate, which we're going to talk about, that energy level. And again, regardless if the person in front of you is dropped, whether it's depression, even talk about autistic burnout or autism. At the end of the day, we're dealing with dropped energy. Let's meet that person where they're at and then help raise up that energy level, right? And so taking into account that person, right, the person in front of you has most likely a mixed diagnosis of autism or ADHD, as well as potentially another mental health piece, which most of us have at least some depressive symptoms from time to time. Most of us have some anxiety symptoms from time to time. So whether they have a formal diagnosis or feeling depressed that day or feeling anxious that day, again, unless that person has a diagnosis, please don't go about trying to figure out, I'm going to diagnose this person, or I'm going to, think that through. Unless you have, you're going and looking for that formal diagnosis, which can be really helpful. I recommend doing that, especially if you're looking for more robust supports, going and getting a psychological evaluation. Know that all people experience anxiety and depression in front of you, and especially someone with autism or ADHD who's neurodiverse, who experiences the world in a very different way than a neurotypical does, that their life is more susceptible to anxiety and depression. So also take that into account, that, right, with different sensory systems, hypo and hypersensitive of all, right, of the 8 senses that we have, which we'll talk about in a little bit of all these supports, that they're just going to experience the world so differently. And that's not good, that's not bad, but it is hard. And that hard can result in anxiety and depression. And to validate that they're experiencing the world in a different way, and that different way is hard, and that different way is not meant for someone who's neurodiverse, and they're needing that extra time, extra patience, extra supports, because all of that's going to lead to, very naturally, anxiety and depression. And it could be some trauma, some PTSD to that, being in a world where they can't escape certain sensory pieces. And we talk about autistic burnout. So I don't know if, who's familiar with that term, but I have found it very, very helpful when conceptualizing, is this just, regular major depressive disorder in front of me? Or is this someone who's neurodiverse, who has an autistic diagnosis and is experiencing autistic burnout? So when we think about the autistic burnout, what does that mean? Again, I link some resources at the bottom, but that's someone who's neurodivergent, who's autistic, and sometimes even ADHD in the world, doing something we call masking, right? Which is putting on neurotypical symptoms kind of that neurotypical face to engage the world around them, which is good, which is that to actually talk about that can be really helpful for engaging a lot of social environments and work environments, how to get a job, right? That can be all really helpful, and that's good. And I work with a lot of adults who have been through a lot of different pieces of supports growing up, but were never told that autistic burnout and masking is a thing, and go into deep states of depression and anxiety in adulthood that's almost crippling. So I find that being able to have this conversation, that you're learning these skills and that's good, but you also might be masking. And that means that you're learning to put these skills on in an environment to engage with neurotypicals. And what that means is they're learning about nervous system energy. That's a lot of this energy, because I'm constantly having to think about what are the social rules in this situation, or how am I not supposed to stim in this situation? And I can't, how do I engage learning in this situation? There's so much nervous system mobilization, maybe even fight or flight in that energy, that I hear this from a lot of parents, that when kids get home from school, boom, meltdown, collapse, right? And you hear a lot of them, they've been out somewhere all day, or they've been in a new environment, boom, come home, collapse, right? And I have a lot of work with a lot of adults that are autistic, reach certain phases in their life, boom, collapse. What does that mean? That means they've learned to mask, but they did not learn how to reintegrate into their neurodivergent world at home, how to create neurodivergent spaces for themselves, how to create spaces that they didn't have to mask, they didn't have to put on the neurotypical face to engage the world, that they could come home and say, this is who I am, and it's functional. I can still cook for myself. I can still live on my, whatever, still do all of the great skills that ABA helps with, right? And they've used their great skills on socializing and engaging the world and making friends and getting a job and learning to use their words and all of those great things. But to come home and have a space and say, all right, I am going to line up all my toys, and that is going to be awesome, and that is going to be fun, and I'm going to hang out with other people that are lining up their toys, and we're going to all talk about our special interests in turns or spins over and over again, and it is delightful, and it is wonderful, and I have a space that is okay to do that. How wonderful! That is great. When we think about, resiliency, we all need spaces up here that we feel safe, social, engaged, connected. That is so important for even the people we're talking about that are neurodivergent, to have spaces and places that they can feel that they don't have to use all of the neurotypical skills, that they get to be connected with on their level. Right? And we think about time and space, and I'm really a big proponent of time, space. When are you going to use these skills, and when are you going to have spaces that you just get to kind of put the mask off? We all do this to some degree, right? How I'm talking right now and how I'm presenting, I promise you, this is not how I talk to my kids at home, right? This is not how I talk to my kids. This is how I talk when I'm presenting information to be absorbed by somebody else, right? And where I am at home is not how I am, with my husband on a date night, right? We think about different places that we go. We all kind of have little different versions of ourselves, and that's not good or bad. It just is, right? It just is what we do. We figure out how to see the social situation, especially if you're neurotypical. It comes so much more fluently that you can see the situation and adjust to what's needed, right? A neurodivergent person has so much more mobilization energy with that. Wait, right? If you get a bunch of neurodivergents together, you get a bunch of autistic kids together or adults together, they're talking their own way at each other, with each other. And especially once they all learn kind of the group rules of being, this is just who we are as a neurodivergent group, it's great. It usually needs little to no support because they're all not trying to be neurotypical. They're just all being neurodivergent together, taking turns, validating each other's spins, listening to each other's special interests. And that's great. And they're taking things literally, and they're all trying to explain things literally. And it's really great. However, that doesn't work in all situations. So this is why it is really important to have that framework when we're thinking about anxiety, depression, PTSD, OCD, bipolar, and autism and ADHD, and trying to piece apart those symptoms and just pull back and say, let me engage with the person in front of me. Where are they at energetically on their nervous system level? And how can I support that energy? Validating that they're doing a lot of really hard work that maybe if you're neurotypical, I don't have to do. And then when you can navigate those pieces, and if you are neurodivergent as a parent, great, or a caregiver, you can, co-regulate and validate that. Oh, I actually really get that. It's really hard to be in all these spaces and have to put on these faces and read all the social cues and figure out how to small talk and figure out when to shake someone's hand, not shake someone's hand, when to do all those little social nuances. And can I say this here or can I not say this here? Or when I'm at a job, I've got to think about all the task analysis to get all my pieces of work done. And then thinking about, okay, I can just come home and I can be able to know, and this is where knowledge is going to be so key. So when we talk about this, I'm going to kind of wean this into or guide us into the next piece of intervention, which is simply supporting the individuals with knowledge. Right. And there's different ways to do this at different ability levels, at different language levels, but being able for them to know where they're at on their nervous system energy. So I have at the end of the handout, like mostly free resources. There's a couple of sheets on there that go through, and I believe there's some that's paid, but I love it. It's like super cheap. It's like $5-10 a sheet, like and I use this with adults all the time, really kid friendly, and has, but says good visual on the polyvagal theory, and it has the different, 3 different states. So being able to map that out. And and I put on there as well for resources, a podcast that I love because it just has so much information as well on differentiating diagnosis and polyvagal theory, thinking about parenting and polyvagal theory, neurodivergence and polyvagal, kind of every topic, and thinking about our energy. So I have just a whole bunch of resources. All the links go to some of my favorite websites and stuff that I use. But being able to map that out, and you can use pictures, you can use drawings, and as simple as explaining that in language that makes sense to that person, visuals, and allowing them to get creative. Okay, when you're feeling feeling happy, or when you're feeling like you want to hang out with others, bring the toys over that show that, right? You can bring toys, you can use food, you can use, right, signs, pictures, words, any sort of item. Like you can get creative, and then you can take a picture of it, and you can easily make a visual then, okay, this is when that person's feeling in that nervous system state, right? And then describe the second one, do the same thing. And then that last one, same thing. You can create their own kind of custom way. And whether they describe, they can do the nervous system. I've had people describe it in animals before, colors. If they have a special interest, if the person loves, like, let's say Marvel or Pokemon, or I don't know, any other, like a planet, any of the zillion other special interests out there, let them do it with their special interests. Engage them in their special interests, because that is a huge way of, right, how are we going to regulate somebody with, neurodiversity is through that special interest. So let them map it out in that way. That's excellent. And especially depending on, where that person's at, it's going to be really, really helpful for everyone in their life to know about that. That's going to be helping them and guiding them through. So that's a resource that's wonderful to share. And allowing them just to be able to navigate those pieces. And I know that the zones of regulation goes with some of that, but I like to pull it out of a state of learning, because it's not a state of, it's more than a state of learning. It's a state of being and navigating in the world. That being in the green doesn't mean I'm always ready to learn. Because I can be in the green and like, I'm not ready to learn, but I'm really ready to play. And I'm really ready to engage my friends right now. So it's more, so you can use those zones colors, feel free to do that, but just know it's more robust than just the learning, because you can easily, right? It can be the green is your ventral, the blue is that bottom, the collapsed, and then the red and orange is the middle. But you also have other states of excitement in there. There's just so much more than the zones has, but you can use that as a platform if you find that it's helpful for the individual. Sometimes I find that it can be helpful. I have used that before with clients as a launching point. I absolutely have. But I have some clients that I have just not, because then they've gotten it confused with a good or bad, with learning. And it's, again, so much more than that. Is like, I want to be green. I don't want to be any of these others. Well, it's not about wanting or not wanting. It's just that you are, and that's not good or bad. It's just where you're at. And if you can accept where you're at, like we all know, like if we can just accept our feelings and experience them and release them, feelings are so much easier to navigate and manage. They become less scary, less overwhelming, and they do as well for an individual with autism and ADHD and as well. Right. So allowing them to be able to find ways just to know where they're at and to navigate them. And I've even had some clients where we've had to just pull back from all of that because there's been such a good or bad with emotions. Just to put a whole pause on, like, are we going to just label all the things and just start labeling where they're at with acceptance? That can be a really big key right there. It allows that individual to realize, oh, this is just a state. It's not a good or bad thing. I'm just a human and I'm allowed to be a human. And then it goes into the conversation as needed into masking and burnout as they get older and learning to navigate their own nervous systems. And then with that, identifying how they respond in the world with their unique sensory system. I can't express this enough. I feel like this is so important, especially as you have individuals getting older and able to start navigating the world, thinking about them being in school, being in jobs, getting them to know how their sensory systems work, right? You have your 8 sensory systems, right? Visual, touch, auditory, smell, taste, proprioceptive, vestibular, and interoceptive. I attach, again, on the resources, some different ways to kind of flesh out these 8 different sensory systems and whether they are, right, hyposensitive, which means that they're not getting a lot of input and will be seeking out input, or they're hypersensitive, which means, oh, there's too much of this going on and I need to like get away from that. Right? Because thinking about, wow, if there's too much sound, I'm going to go into, right, fight or flight. But right, if there's so much sound, I might just collapse if it's too loud. So, right, thinking about that, they interplay together. I've even had, thinking about recently, a client, we were mapping out their nervous system. And, this was an older individual about to go into college. And this person found that then the same sensory system, there were aspects that this person was hypo and hyper, and how to differentiate that. And then realizing, wow, I'm doing a lot of masking and I had no idea I was. Yeah. That seems really important for you to know, especially as we're preparing this person to go into college and what that's going to be like. What are the areas that they're like, wow, I avoid this, I avoid that. I know when this happens, I do over here, or I just, thinking about all the things that they already do to manage their sensory systems that they're not mindful of. But if they go into a new environment, and this is where I see a lot of transitions, they go into a new environment or a new situation, and this is where you're going to see a lot of that anxiety and depression, the OCD and the bipolar flare up because they don't know, they haven't been taught how to manage the unique sensory system, the impact that has on their nervous system, and the things that they're going to need to do in response to all of that. And right, so those are just wildly important tools for them to have. And even just that mapping out. So often when I do this, like, especially if I'm working with, I'm just thinking about high school, college, and adults that are just, well, I found this out. And after, right, a collapse in their social life, and it's just really sad things that happen that just kind of collapse and realizing, oh, I have a neurodivergent diagnosis. Wow. That would have been really great to know. Or they've been just kind of masking and dealing with it their whole lives, realizing, I think I need some more support around this. And then, okay, let's learn about your sensory systems. Okay, let's talk about your nervous system. And now let's talk about the interplay of the two. Okay, now let's talk about what we do to meet those needs and get really mindful of that kind of 3-step process. So I think that that's going to be really, really important for people to know. And right, as a just parent or caregiver, I don't recommend going in and just like, I'm going to do all this by myself perfectly well. It's a team. It's a team. So pull in your team of resources, pull in other therapists working with you, and do as much as you can, as much as you want to do. And really feel free, because if you're a parent or a caregiver, living with this person, they don't also need you. If you can find ways to resource it out, also you just get to be that caregiver, or just get to be that at-home support system, just get to be that parent. So find your other people, find your other helpers to be able to help you go through all of those pieces. And if there aren't a lot of other support systems, then feel really free to go through it as slowly as you like. Because, right, I'm going to talk about at the end that a big, big, big piece of this, I left this in from a little section that I had in the other one about caregiver support. And like, we talk about self-care, right? It's really just caring for ourselves. That is going to be a huge part of how that this person is going to be managing their life, is if you feel well resourced, if you feel well supported. It's a lot to manage, it's a lot to undertake. So make sure you're taking really good care of yourself. And then we move down. I've got some resources there about masking and burnout, again at the bottom. So I want to talk to you guys now about some strategies. So when we think about the nervous system energy, one of the most important things to do is to meet the energy, but not the dysregulation. So when we're thinking about like how to co-regulate with somebody, I'm going to talk about co-regulation in here, that, right, if I'm really mad, how many of us have been really mad and then someone's like, just calm down, it's fine, you'll be okay. I have lots of thoughts that run through my mind that sometimes in the right environment, I say to that person if they're telling me that. Again, knowing time and place, but that does not calm my anger. It does not calm my anxiety. Or if I'm feeling really low and depressed that day, if someone comes up, everything's going to be great. Come on, let's go. Again, I might have choice words for that person that comes in with their like happy-go-lucky spirit saying, you'll be fine, you'll get out of it, let's move on. No, that's not how that works. That's not how it works for us. That's not how it works for someone who's neurodivergent as well. That's not just how it works for humans, right? So think about with all these strategies, you can do it in a way that's meeting the energy. So if somebody's mad, meet them in their energy. Yeah, I hear you. You're mad. Absolutely. You can always validate the emotion. You don't have to validate the behavior. You can always, always, always validate the emotion behind the behavior. I firmly, firmly believe that, right? Regardless of what someone's doing, I can sit and validate that feeling. And I go right there with that energy and validate, you're mad. I hear you're mad. I can get why you're mad. Like I said, if someone explains to me why they're mad, I can usually follow it. Again, I might not agree with that you punched somebody or you cussed out somebody, like that's the best course of action, but I can understand why you're mad. Or if someone's dropped, I don't want to do this anymore. Like, I'm just done. I feel overwhelmed. I'm done. Like, you just dropped. You get dropped with them. I'm not going to get dysregulated with them. I'm going to get dropped with them. Yeah. Yeah. Maybe you're just kind of lots of quiet. Hear you. Makes sense. Meet them in that energy, validate that feeling, however that looks, right? This is just one example of that. You know your person and how that they would most receive that energy, what language to use or not use, words to use or not use, body positions to use or not use. And then this is where you come in and help them regulate their nervous systems, because once they're co-regulating with you or somebody else, you have an in to start then teaching them the new skills. So in thinking about co-regulation, I actually put this beneath the two other strategies. So I apologize for my a little bit out of order on my handout, that you can actually co-regulate with anything with a bioelectrical field. So that includes people, that includes animals, and it includes nature. So remember that it's not just us talking to them that they can co-regulate with. And so if we're thinking about people, you can co-regulate with voices, right? We can co-regulate through technology. We know this. You can also co-regulate through recorded technology. Think about a lot of like the people you work with or that you live with, and that they really love watching maybe a boxing and unboxing video, that they really love watching specific YouTube channels or podcasts. I would like to roll the dice and bet that they are co-regulating with the humans on that technology. Let's put a bet that they might be. Right? I'm not saying that we have all the technology used with absolutely no limits, or I'm not saying you do that, but just be mindful that they might be co-regulating and that it might not just be zoning out on the screen, that they might be getting some regulation from that. Again, be mindful, be thoughtful about how you're using that. But just talking to a lot of autistic adults, I hear this all the time because they haven't found a good community in person, that it's way easier to find a community online and recorded because it is so hard to find in-person community. So they have found it virtually. So just be mindful that that might be a thing. And they have found in terms with nature, is just looking at a picture of nature for 10 minutes makes significant shifts in your nervous system. A picture of nature, not even actually stepping outside in nature. I feel like that just screams like how powerful nature is. So, right, be thinking about how to expose, right, the people you're working with, living with, to nature. And of course, animals. Right? People, I mean, I the amount of stories I hear from the equine assisted therapy and, therapy dogs and therapy animals and just having a pet in the home. I'm sure you guys have as well, but just how powerful it is to be able to sit and co-regulate with an animal and not have to talk. It's really, really lovely for all of us, but especially when there are so many barriers to social communication. And then having to sit and try to learn a bunch of neurotypical communication strategies when you're neurodivergent, it can just be stressful. So just sit with an animal and just to have that animal be with you, you can co-regulate with that animal. It's just really wonderful and delightful. So know that that co-regulation is really, really powerful and can look different. And it's allowed to look different than you would expect it to be with a neurotypical. Just allow it to be different. It's okay if it's different. It's not less effective. It's just different. So feel free to get creative with that and what that can look like, how to bring an environment of co-regulation. And again, this is where I'm going to just keep going under there. My last bullet point of the handout is caregiver support. I'm not leaving like caregivers and parents and, people working with neurodivergent folks out of the loop, like you just got to figure it out. Like, no, we're not meant to do this alone. Get support. And I put some good online groups for us as well to get into, thinking about therapy for ourselves, thinking about finding people that are going to validate our feelings and emotions and aren't just going to try to jump in and give suggestions or try to fix or correct what we're doing, making sure that that is a big part of all of this. So one type of therapy strategy that I wanted to talk about that can be done at either nervous system state is called emotional freedom technique. And what this is, it's a combination of Eastern and Western psychology that you're be tapping on. And this is the basic recipe I'm just going to be going through tonight, 8 different meridian points. And we'll talk about where those are. And I'd love to do a little demonstration of that you're going to be talking about the things that are hard. So validating the hard feelings, things that feel overwhelming, and then moving to the truth you would like to move forward to. So if anyone would like, I would love for somebody to pick, let's pick a topic of whether it's managing family life. Everyone's got family life somewhere. So managing family life. So 8 things that are hard. So little statements. It could be a word and things that you could put in that you can tap on. Situations that's happening, emotions, physical sensations, what you're thinking or feeling. So if I was going to come up with 8 things right quick to pop in, I'd say, again, just focusing on what's hard. This is not encapsulating, right, the whole experience. Tired, upper back pain, wanting to do my best. But there's, right, like I'm wanting to do my best, feeling like I missed the mark, feeling overwhelmed, let's say fatigue. I want to go to sleep. I want more sleep. So feel free if somebody or 1 or 2 people would like to just put in 8 things about family life that feels hard. I'm not going to read out who says what, but I just love to use these as a guide of guiding us through some tapping. So in the chat, if someone can do that, and it just doesn't have to be full sentences. If it's just a word, that's excellent. So I'll give a minute. Let me see. I got 2 comments. And here, I will add in my own. Let's see, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. If somebody wants to put in 1 more. Otherwise, I can. Oh, do it. Tension in my shoulders. I'm like, not enough. Yeah, there we go. Okay. So I'll talk through here. Yep, we've got 9 points. Great. So what I want to ask you guys to do now is, if everyone, again, same topic about parenthood, or just not parenthood, but just family life. Family life that, in my best states brings me joy, or what I want to move forward towards. So like an example could be, right, those days that I really am a patient person. I have lots of patience in me. My family really is great. I really do love them. Right? I can feel tension out of my shoulders. Almost the converse. Like, right? There are times that I do that. So, right, I'll type in a couple of mine. we have 3. If we can get 5 more, I put in 2. Okay, let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Let's see here. 7, 8. Excellent. Okay. So we're just going to do 1 round. It's going to be very simplified version. 1 round of things that are hard and 1 round of things that are going well. What I'm going to first do is walk us through all the tapping points. And what you can do is you can tap them, you can press them, or you can rub them. And after we go through all of this, again, I'll talk about different applications of this, but I just want us all to experience this. And what's also really nice is when you tap along, even with someone else, let's say they're talking about things that don't feel necessarily pertinent to you, you still get the tapping benefit of that, of the whole process. So like when I tap along with my clients, like after a tapping session, I'm like, oh, I feel really great. Actually, like I feel more deeply regulated. I feel more deeply grounded, and can see more joy in things and feel the energy because we're co-regulating in that process, that you're getting the tapping benefits of all of that. So again, use 2 or 3 fingers. And we're going to go, I have my glasses off here so you can see, is an eyebrow point. So right here, kind of really on the crest of your eyebrow. And again, I usually do 3 fingers so I just don't miss it. You might feel a slight sensitivity when touching it. You might feel a little bit of pressure. Some people don't feel anything at all, and that's okay. And again, you can tap, press, or rub. Either one. We're just finding the points right now. Again, side of eye is literally on this bone right here on the side of your eye. And then under the eye, again, right here, under the eye, on that, I don't know the names of the bones. I hear under your eye bone. Right there where my bag is, under my eyes. All right, so under the nose, so right here in the crevice between your nose and lip, right in there. And again, it's your chin point, so between your lip and the bottom of your chin, you usually have like a dent, for lack of better words. And then there's the collarbone point. So we have our collarbone, it's right underneath. I typically teach, especially when working with anyone with trying to find that exact spot, the whole hand. This is how I teach it to most people, right here under the collarbone. You can, again, tap, rub, press. There is an under the arm point. So not in your armpit, but right, like if you put your fingers like in your armpit there, it's right at the end of that hand point. So right there on the bone, you're going to feel it. If you're not on your back, but as you come forward, there's that sensitivity right there on that under the shoulder blade bone. I really should learn the names of these bones, but I don't think most people know them either. So right under there, and then top of your head. So it's right in the middle, right in the center. And again, with a lot of people I work with, a lot of clients, I just say, take the whole hand and get on the top of the head. They will hit it. And I do this. This is how I do it. And I tap just because I find that it's way easier to do it that way and versus assume think of all that fine motor control. And then we'll go through this, and there's usually a whole setup phrase. We're not going to do that right now. Again, we're just going to go through the basic parts, but I attach on the handout links to 2 different of the main websites that walk you through it. They have YouTube videos. They each have apps. They have so much resources on how to do this. You can do this with your child. You can do this with, you can do it like right on the app. You can do it with, I don't know, lots of different ways at home with a therapist. So we're going to go through it. And we're just going to go through and do each tapping point. And if you have a child or someone you're working with, you can tap on yourself and that other person. I do that frequently as that person allows. So before we jump in, I'll invite us all to take 3 just deep breaths to kind of ready our bodies and minds. So we'll start. We'll go in and out. 2 more. In and out. Last one. In and out. All right. So we'll start here at the eyebrow point, and I will tap, but feel free to tap, rub, press, kind of experiment with it. Anxiety when the bus comes. Thinking about meeting and seeing your kids or the people you're taking care of, not knowing what will happen. Side of eye, having patience with toddlerhood, having patience with the different stages of development. They are hard. I feel overwhelmed. There's a lot to get done. There's a lot of things to do. Under the nose, I feel uncertain about bedtime. Will they eat what I've cooked? There's a lot of preparation that goes into the whole evening and bedtime routine, and that can be exhausting. Chin, fatigue. You're tired. And sometimes, like I say, I'm tired of being tired. Deep fatigue. Collarbone, wanting to help, but feeling powerless. That desire to want to help others, but not always knowing what to do. Under the arm, feeling like I could always be doing better. That's sometimes that feeling like I'm not enough, or I don't know the right things to do, or I could have responded better in this moment or with that situation. Top of the head, feeling like you're not enough. And thinking about that tension in our shoulders, our neck, could be our stomach, our chest, wherever we hold that tension. And as we move, we're going to take a breath. Go to the eyebrow and think about our kids are funny and unique. Think about the people we work with, the people we live with. They are funny, they are unique, they're a joy to be with. Side of the eye. You can feel the release of tension when you see people getting along, when you see people meeting goals or gaining skills. You can literally feel that tension release. Under the eye, joy when I hear people laughing. I feel so much joy from that, the co-regulation of someone else experiencing joy and knowing that I get to be a part of that. Under the nose, I have a great support system. My husband, our partner, and I really enjoy each other. Thinking about the people you partner with. You can enjoy them and press into that support. Chin, that I really can be patient and generous. Maybe not all the time, but a lot of the time I can be. We all can be. Collarbone, watching my daughter grow, watching our children grow, and watching the people we work with grow. There's such joy in that. Under the arm, that we're stronger together. I don't have to do everything by myself. I get to do things with others. And top of the head, connecting with my partner, connecting with the people that we partner with in our home, in all areas. We all partner with others and we get to connect with them. And take a breath. And usually at the beginning, I'll do like a rating of 0 to 10 scale. But even in that little cycle, I'd say my tension went down probably a point or two. I don't know how you guys felt at the end of that. But again, this was just a short example, but I'm like, oh, I can feel it went down even a point or two. In this setting, just 2 rounds, right? Thinking about how powerful that would be to do something around what that person is feeling in that moment. And then to be able to go through a couple rounds, right, on what feels hard and validating that, and then what feels what feels good, where you would, where that person can move to, what you do see in that person. And when you have someone, so different applications of this, you can tap on that person. So feel free to just, if that person, for whatever reason, just is not in that emotional state, maybe doesn't have all of the hand-eye coordination, right? But it's simple, just you can do it with a model tapping along, but feel free to tap on them if, right, thinking about physical consent and all of those pieces, but especially if it's somebody in your home or your family, feel free to do that as the relationship and where they're at allows. That can be a really, really powerful experience to have someone be just sitting there, tapping out those different points. And then again, feel free to, especially if that person's not wanting to talk, and whatever the language abilities are, because typically when I do this, I say, okay, repeat after me out loud or in your mind, right? You can just tap and they don't have to repeat. It is okay. I have plenty of people that I've taught working with their kids or people at home that they just tap and they talk through what they might be feeling. And sometimes that person interjects, right? I mean, even if you've got, right, different type of augmented, communication devices, right? You can get the statements from them ahead of time. They can they can type on there what they're feeling. And as I'm tapping along and I have people interject, no, I'm actually feeling this. Great. I got it, that's awesome. Correct me. Let me know what you're actually feeling. So especially if you're in a situation, you're like, I'm going to guess. Just say that. This is what I think you might be feeling. Interrupt me, please, if you are feeling something else. And there's different tapping scripts and meditations if you're not sure what to say. So really feel free to go on the websites and peruse. And there's tapping meditations. You can just turn them on and let them play and you both tap along together. The Tapping Solution really has such a user-friendly app. It's literally the Tapping Solution. And they have so many meditations and it's really not that expensive for the year. They even have ones for kids and families. But they have, and all of their topics are broken down alphabetical, and they're all really well organized. I think there's over 400 meditations at this point. So literally, if you're like, I don't know what to say, and I don't have to think about what I have to say in that moment, awesome. Just use a resource, turn on an app or a YouTube video, and just tap along with that. Really don't make that harder than it needs to be. But yeah, so think about that somebody can watch a video and tap along with them. They can watch you and tap along with them. You can print out visuals so that person can see it. So there's so many different ways and resources to help someone learn this modality. I know we're about at time. I do put in as well some different specific vagus nerve calming strategies, as well as attaching 2 YouTube playlists that have a lot of really good vagus nerve calming strategies. So I'm going to just briefly go through these that I have listed. I did some of these with the caregivers, my last webinar, but I thought they would be worth repeating because you can teach someone else to do this really well. As long as they have the skill of modeling and imitation, they can do this. And if they don't, you can do this for them and with them, right? Knowing that your relationship with that person and being able to help them through that. We're talking about breath work. The really key is making sure the exhale is longer than the inhale. And knowing that adding a vocalization or a sigh, humming, singing, that's really, really powerful. So again, thinking about somebody that that's autistic, thinking about vocal stems. Let's think about vocal stems for a moment as we're talking about this. Some of these vocal stems might be vagus nerve relaxing, reducing strategies, or tension reducing strategies that they have just come up with that, right? They're just using. They don't even realize that they're really mindful. I'm feeling anxiety. I'm going to use this humming, right? They're not doing maybe all of that. So when we think about, helping somebody with stimming, know that if the stim is not appropriate for the time and place, just be really mindful about that you might be taking away someone's vagus nerve calming strategy. How are you going to replace it? And how are you going to honor what's happening, what you're doing, and why you're doing it? Because I think all of that goes into somebody that has a comorbidity of autism and anxiety, and autism and PTSD, and autism and depression. Not saying you don't teach somebody like in the middle of the classroom to not be singing loud songs or to do loud vocal stims. Again, time and place, just be honoring of what we're doing when we're asking that person to not stim in the classroom, that they're taking away, that they might be feeling really stressed and anxious, and we're taking away their coping strategy. And so if we're taking away a coping strategy, let's make sure we have a coping strategy that matches we're thinking about from a behavioral standpoint, the function of what that coping strategy was meeting. So if we're taking another hum or a stim away, can we teach them to quietly hum? Can we do some breath work? Can we teach them to sigh? Might be a little less, it might be still a little annoying, but it might be less annoying. It might be less interruptive. And I often tell people, like, I do a deep sigh now when I've just learned to, that's what I need to do. And I just tell people, I'm not mad. I'm just sighing. You might hear me sigh, but it's just me regulating my nervous system. Teach them to say that. Teach them to, right? How are we teaching them to do that? And if we're needing to do another type of stim altogether, let's give them another one. Let's give them something else to do to regulate their nervous system in a way that is, right, adaptable to the environment, and then give them environments that they can sing or hum or do all of their flapping and moving to regulate their nervous systems as they need to. Again, this is all with that mind frame of that this person has autism and another diagnosis. Let's honor that it's not just anxiety, it's anxiety and autism, anxiety and ADHD. That there is going to be masking, aka if they're not careful, burnout, and that is going to lead to an exacerbation of all the other symptoms. So to put those pieces in all together, some other simple strategies, and one that I didn't go through last time was, so we have a lot of nerve ending points on our nail beds, and actually these are meridian points. I don't know if I went through this one last time, but either way. So on your thumb, if you press for 30 seconds, right? So this is the top and bottom, side to side. And again, don't hold the tension as you're doing this. Breathe as you're doing this. 30 seconds on one side. This is such an easy one. I love these little easy ones to do. You can do them anywhere, and they regulate the vagus nerve. I don't have a stopwatch out, so I'm doing give or take 30 seconds. And then we're going to go top and bottom. I can kind of feel it on the side to side, but I get the top and bottom, I'm like, whoo, I can feel that my vagus nerve chilling out. And you can do that, the top and bottom, with your other nails. So there's meridian points here. I usually start there, but you can do it on those as well. I have some people, especially those that already fidget a lot with their hands, they might already be getting this vagus nerve point. So I have a lot of people that are like, oh, I mess with my fingers and my fingernails all the time. You're probably catching those meridian points. Let's do that purposefully. And another one is the back of the neck. There's a vagus nerve intersection point here. So feel free to move. Even that back of the neck massage, you're actually helping tone and strengthen the vagus nerve brake, which means if you're becoming dysregulated, it turns on a healthy brake to bring it back up. This tones it. So it's not just a back massage or a neck massage for your tense neck, which obviously releasing that tension from your muscles is good, but it actually tones. So another one here, this collarbone point. Again, it's not just a meridian point. It's a intersection of the vagus nerve. So I have a lot of people are like, oh yeah, when I'm stressed, I rub right here. Oh, you're probably getting a vagus nerve point and you just didn't know it, a meridian point. So again, someone can do that. They can just tap there. Remember that people can do tapping in lots of places and not even know that you're doing that. Or if there's a couple of these points that just feel more comforting than others, and see if that person really gravitates towards them, right? I feel like some people that love these 2 points, like, great, just put your hand here. Nobody knows you're touching these meridian points because you're stressed. Yeah, nobody knows. I have gone through meetings before. Like nobody's watching you, calculating where are you putting your hands. No one cares. No one's watching you. Not that much, really. So you can do these things. You can teach people to do them in lots of easy places. And it just doesn't take a lot of, fine motor, gross motor control, and even coordination to do. You can really teach them to anybody, I have found, to get those spots. So when you think about another one is right under that arm point, you can get both under the arm points and put your arms down and kind of press in, a gentle pressing. It's like a really grounding, containing one. And then another one that I really like too is under the knees. So you're gonna put your hands crossed under the knees and bring your hands together as you gently press your knees apart. And again, you can teach this, right? Just do some imitation. Even come with a picture for it. So those are some of the vagus nerve activities, but I put, again, some YouTube playlists that just go through a lot more if people are looking for more resources on different strategies to tone the vagus nerve. There's so much out there right now. So yeah, I think we're at time, but yeah, any questions or comments? Otherwise, we'll wrap up, and yeah, thank you for coming.
Well, I think that was great. Thought that was super helpful. And I think, I don't know, I think I really just appreciate your neurodiversity approach to things, and, that, not trying to change our loved ones with autism, but, to put ourselves in their heads and, try to, meet them where they're at. And yeah, sorry, I'm not articulating that very well, but I really appreciate your approach to all of this. I was wondering if you could speak briefly. So Rua and I both help with the intakes for our company, and I get a lot of phone calls from parents of children of all ages looking for ABA therapy, but specifically for emotional regulation or, sometimes symptoms of depression and anxiety. I was wondering if you could speak a little bit to when you would suggest ABA over, counseling or, talk therapy, vice versa, when, both approaches would be helpful, like who is appropriate for, individual counseling. Yeah. Can you speak a little bit about that really quickly?
Yeah, absolutely. So one thing I'll say is that I really, really love play therapy. I find that talk therapy in general has its place, but I don't use a lot of talk therapy with adults regardless. So there's lots and lots of strategies out there to meet people where they're at through all of the different ways that we express and communicate. So just to talk about some therapy strategies that are helpful, and then I'll kind of talk about the differences. So I love, they're called didactic play therapy strategies. So things like, I think it's child-parent psychotherapy. Then there's TheraPlay. I do TheraPlay, but it's not the only one. Then there's one more, and I cannot think of the name of it. I apologize. But they work with the caregiver and the child to help regulate the emotion. So they use the power of the relationship and co-regulation, everything we've talked about tonight, to really create that space of co-regulation. There's also AUT play, AUT play, that's autistic specific play therapy. I've heard mostly good things about it. I think with anything, it works well for some and not well for others, but I've heard mostly really helpful things about AUT play. And so I think if you've got somebody who is, if we're talking about safety issues, I think then it can be really helpful to bring in that they go about ABA for emotional regulation and coping skills. I think if we're talking about safety and maybe some physical aggression, depending on the level, ABA can be helpful there. Absolutely. In conjunction with, I want to say always, 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 if we're talking about just emotional regulation and coping skills, I think ABA can be helpful if it's done in conjunction with an autistic sensitive therapist, a neurodivergent therapist, a therapist that works from that framework that can teach that child, that, especially if we're talking about children of any age, like how to communicate in a way that is intuitive for them, their feelings and emotions, how to be sensitive to how the differences that neurodivergent people experience emotions are not always the same as the way neurotypicals experience emotions. And a lot of the curriculums used traditionally in ABA settings aren't always neurodivergent friendly. I attached one curriculum for social skills on the resources that is, I've gotten really good feedback on, that's neurodivergent friendly. And again, it's not saying that we don't need skills to communicate with each other, like neurodivergent versus neurotypical. It's saying, right, that we each have ways that we can learn to communicate with each other, and that person who's neurodivergent, when to use the skills, when not to. But if we're talking about just emotional regulation and coping skills, unless, and we can talk more, I can send some more resources on neurodivergent friendly coping skills and emotional regulation curriculum that I've been referred to. I think it's really helpful to work with a therapist who's going to help them figure out how they're actually experiencing all their emotions, and then let them process what's all been going on. Because usually there's a story there, and usually you've got, caregiver burnout, compassion fatigue. So then there's stressors at home. And I find that especially if you can, these therapies tend to the caregiver as well. They empower the caregiver. They acknowledge the stressors the caregiver is going through, which, right, especially like seeing the parents that are coming in, they're tired, they're stressed, they need supports too, which is why I love these therapies, because it brings them into that process of healing and emotional regulation.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you. I feel like that's super helpful. Appreciate that. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say just by default, make sure it's kind of like, yes, and we can teach skills, but we want to take cues from a therapist who's neurodivergent friendly, who's going to take that into account. And just ask them if they're neurodivergent affirming. That's like the phrase I typically, when I'm referring people to, are you neurodivergent affirming?
Okay.
And they'll let you know.
Yeah, I just want to say I definitely agree with Rachel in regard to like this webinar being very useful, I think, to a lot of caregivers as well as professionals, because the strategies can be so discreet and so just quick to use, without a lot of, it's not time consuming. It's not like you're asking, to do steps 1 through 10, right? Like it's not over complex, I guess. And then I think that like piece about co-regulation, I think, is often something that people don't think about. And, we just are not human beings that live in isolation. We're always in relation to others. There's always connection. And I think that's a way to also just promote that connection. And to, I think that in itself is so therapeutic, just that connection piece, right? Like just the way to bond. I also though had a question too, and it kind of relates to Rachel's question a little bit, but I wonder if a lot of families sometimes overlook the mental health piece, because the primary diagnosis is autism or ADHD, and they're hyper focused on that and the behaviors associated with that and treatment for that. So it can be like you got blinders on, like just trying to kind of navigate all those challenges alone, that the mental health piece can easily be overlooked or be thought of as maybe just part of that autism diagnosis. So what would you recommend or say to like, how would you advise that families maybe identify some of those characteristics that might look a little, that would set it apart or distinguish it a little bit, so that they, like little warning signs or red flags that maybe would help get it on their radar, so then they can consider, hey, maybe there's something else here, like a comorbid kind of thing going on.
I think a good rule of thumb is if you have lots of acting out behaviors, whether that's aggression, property destruction, if you've got verbal aggression, right? We know that, all behavior, is communication. It all has a function. My guess is if the behaviors have gotten that big, there's probably some really big communication that isn't being expressed in another way that's a much more healthier for everyone in their life, including themselves, right? We think about self-harm and all of those different behaviors. To me, that sends the, what else is being communicated here? What's being met? What's not being heard? What's not being met? What's being missed? It's where my head immediately goes. But I think it's important to know that even if they don't qualify for an additional diagnosis, you have internalizing behaviors as well, that if you've got someone deeply in their own world, and to break them out of that world can create lots of meltdown. That also tells me, again, the intensity of the behavior tells me that there's an intensity of the internal state that's not being, like those private events that are not being seen or heard. So even if you've got someone that doesn't have those larger pieces, just know that being neurodivergent usually comes with more anxiety and depression. And if they have the resources and means to titrate ABA support with some counseling, even if it's just someone that's going to walk them through parent training and parent support from that neurodivergent vantage point, because I love that I think overlaps well with all this like relationship-based parenting and approach. I think it just overlaps well. Like I can connect, I can co-regulate. And finding resources I've got parents that just come out. I don't actually see the kids. I just work with the parents and guiding them through those supports. Because, I can then attune to the parents' emotional needs and what they're going through, as well as give them supports and tools on working and supporting their child. Because as they get more support, it's going to reduce the anxiety. So I would definitely look for another diagnoses and be thinking about that if you've got some of those bigger and internalized or internal or external behaviors. But just know it's probably a part of it, because it's really stressful to be in a world that's not made for you. And it's really stressful to have sensory systems that can be just not complementary to your environment, and constantly have to manage that, and constantly be learning new skills, and constantly be going to therapies. Like it's just a lot. So just know that they're probably got some, right? It's not that there's a bad, it's just a lot. And they could probably use some emotional support. It's kind of like my good rule of thumb.
I think that's a great answer.
Yeah.
Chris, were you
Yeah,
gonna
I
say
just want to kind of piggyback off of like Rua's comment that that is kind of a lot of what happened with mostly my son and in my house is, we were like treating the autism, and it took me a really long time to realize that there were other mental health issues going on. So that very much is a thing, which is why I think it's so important to bring this to light, that there can be, mental health issues along with the autism. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, great. Well, great questions. Those are really, I love it, being able to, dialogue and kind of take those pieces apart. At the end of the day, I feel like, everyone could use some counseling. I think it's kind of like my tagline. We all could use some extra support, but I definitely, like I said, definitely looking for that support when there's a lot going on, and not to say that it replaces it, but it can be a helpful component to it, and especially if they're collaborating together.
I agree.
So
I'm going to put my email just in the chat really quick. If anyone who is watching this recording has any additional questions for Jessie or would like, her additional resources, feel free to reach out to me at this email, rachel@instructional-aba.com. And I can help facilitate questions and get information from Jessie. So
Wonderful.
yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much, Jessie. I really appreciate it.
Yes,
Thank you so much.
Thank
This was
you.
wonderful.